This is She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. Your host, Kinsey Roberts, interviews incredible women in the wedding industry who are making their mark and creating success on their terms. Join the conversation.
Hello, welcome to episode 142 of She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. This is your host, as always, Kinsey Roberts. We have a excellent show today, as always. I am thrilled to welcome Lena Richards to the podcast to talk about how she sold her wedding rental business back in 2018. This will be the first podcast episode that I have had specifically dedicated to wedding rental business owners since episode 99 with Taylor Bradford. So it has been a while, and I'm very pleased to have a new topic to discuss, specifically selling a business in this way. And I can't think of anyone better than Lena to walk us through this process because she is very methodical, she's very detailed, she's very business oriented, and absolutely brilliant. Before I get to her bio, let me tell you two quick things. Number one, I am so sorry. I apologize ahead of time. This is one of the interviews I've recently had as I record this where my sound was a little funky during the interview. I don't know what happened. I apologize in advance. It does sound not as quality as the intro, as the other episodes you are used to. It's still great information. There's not an echo, so it's easier to listen to, but do know that it sounds a little bit like we're in a tin can. So heads up on that, but don't miss us on the show because you're still going to love it. And the second thing I want to let you know is that Lena has generously offered 15% off her online shop. She has some incredible templates and resources in there specifically for specialty rental business owners, and I encourage you to go take a look at them. I am putting the link in the show notes. The 15% off code is She Creates. That's also in the show notes. If you need to know how to find the show notes, there's a tutorial for iPhone users on my Instagram. You can find that at She Creates Business. It's on the tutorial highlight. If you do not have an iPhone, you can type into Google how to find the show notes in XYZ Podcast Player. And XYZ Podcast Player means insert the name of the podcast player that you're using. Thank you, Lena, for that very generous offer. I really appreciate it. And I popped over to the shop, you guys, and wow, it's packed. If you run a wedding rental business or you want to, you need to go to that shop. Let me tell you a little bit about Lena, and then we are going to get to the interview. Lena is the multidisciplinary entrepreneur and creative genius behind the award-winning specialty rental company, Something Borrowed Portland. Sold in 2018, Lena now offers mentoring and strategic business planning to specialty rental companies looking to build and scale their business. So without further ado, let's head to the show where we're talking with Lena Richards all about how to sell your wedding rental business. Lena, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here.
I am thrilled to have you. You guys, you may not know, if you've been a long-time listener to the podcast, you know that back in 2017, it would have been, I had Devin McCabe on the podcast, and we talked a lot about her upcoming conference at the time called the Together Experience. And Lena and I had the pleasure of meeting at the Together Experience, which for me, Lena, I don't know if you feel the same, but simultaneously feels like it was yesterday and also 10 years ago.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Like when your email hit my inbox, I knew exactly who you were right away. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was all the way back in 2017. So I'm so honored and just a pleasure to have you here. And we're going to chat about you selling your business, which is a really cool topic.
Thank you.
Yeah. You know, and everybody knows, I read your professional bio there at the top of the show, but I would love for you really quickly, just about 2 minutes or so, tell us who you are and what you're currently doing in the industry.
Sure. So my name is Lena Richards, and I am currently a business strategist and mentor to specialty and vintage rental businesses. So a little bit different than what I was doing when we first met a couple of years ago. But I decided to kind of branch off into this. It was a very natural progression for me, and we'll kind of get to some other reasons here soon. Yeah. But I really try to help coach and mentor rental companies so that they can do more in less time, whether it's basically all the foundations to a business, your systems on automation, identifying your ideal client, sales and marketing, finances and creating a budget, all of those things that are core to a business, but a lot of people don't put a lot of kind of merit or sight into because they're so busy working on the creative aspect.
Yeah. And I like this niche for you and because, well, for many reasons, but also because there's nobody else who's doing this, I don't think. And it's such a needed thing. And not that I know of anyway, I don't know of any other, and I interviewed a lot of people. I don't know of any other rental coaches and consultants and people who are educating on this side of the business, which is interesting because, the rental business has really boomed.
Oh, yes. I have been putting together kind of a little list of specialty and vintage rental businesses. And I did this when I first started with my rental company, Something Borrowed. And I think back then there was less than 100. And so far my list is at 400.
No way.
So it is insane. And, when you're dealing with rentals, especially specialty rentals, we have so many issues that other niches within the wedding industry just aren't privy to.
That's right.
So I really wanted to take everything that I've learned over the past 7-8 years and really just help other people, succeed in their own business.
Oh, that's brilliant. I cannot wait to dig into this. I wanted to, and Lena, you and I talked about this offline. Usually you guys know that we don't do a lot of like, this is my story, and that's the end of the podcast episodes, but I want Lena to tell us her story because it fits directly into how she, the impetus for selling the business. And so I want to dig into this. Can you tell us about your specialty and vintage rental business, Something Borrowed, and how you got into that? Give us the scoop on that.
Sure, sure. I think like most of us in the wedding industry, I started because I was getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, and again, this was around 2011, there wasn't anything like this in the Portland, Oregon area. And I am not a cookie cutter person. I have tattoos. I drop the F-bomb every now and then. I am more about style and doing things a little bit differently. So I started to source and acquire things. And I thought, this is kind of a good business idea. And no one else is doing this. There has to be a market for it. And sure enough, there was. It exploded. I kind of do say it was an overnight success. Not that it was luck. It was just the right time, the right place, and a lot of hard work. We started in my basement, my creepy basement, as I say, and it blew up into a full staff of 9 employees, warehouse space, even a small event space that I ran for a while, totaling roughly 10,000 square feet, delivery, logistics, all of the things that go into a rental business. And everything was going well. And then just 2 years ago, I ended up getting a divorce. And, you always ask, well, what's the why of your business?
Yeah.
Why did you get started? Like, what is that story? Well, for me, it was because I got married and that why was just no longer there. So I had to really start to evaluate within my business, okay, what is my exit strategy going to be? I don't want to tank this business. I have grown this into an award-winning rental company that's nationally known. And we have, we kind of, and I'll kind of get into this, we did kind of create a local brand. I would go to a coffee shop and people would know exactly who we were, which was just kind of weird. But the why was gone and I wanted to see it continue on and made the very hard decision to sell. And it was like, okay, where do I start? I don't even know what to do. I've only known one other rental company that sold several years ago, but even that was, there just wasn't any information out there.
Yeah.
So I reached out to my mentor, one of my business mentors, who helped kind of coach me along the way. But even then, there wasn't from a small boutique company in the wedding industry, there was just nothing out there. And knowing, okay, this might take 6, 8, 12 months to do, but I really want to see the success of the business carry on. And I was able to do that in a really kind of super roundabout, crazy way.
Do you feel like you got a divorce? That's a really pivotal time in any person's life. And not only do we ask ourselves, like, what's the why of our business? But I feel like when we have these milestones in life, we also say, like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Did you have any of those kind of conversations with yourself too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I figured, it was like, wow, I'm in my early 40s. And is this really what I want to be doing the rest of my life?
Right.
Do I really want to be staying up until midnight, 1:00 on the weekends and not having weekends, not having a summer? It was really stressful. Owning a rental company, there's so many moving parts. on top of having to constantly be being, on top of the trends and purchasing inventory and giving yourself a decent salary as well. That for me, as I kind of mentioned, that natural progression was to go into coaching and mentoring. In fact, it was at the Together conference. I remember standing up and saying, this is what I'm going to do. This is the next phase of my life. Yes. For me, it was just I love to help people. I love to empower, especially women in business in the wedding industry, so that they can achieve their goals. Because I feel that a lot of us have kind of this imposter syndrome, and I had it myself. So everything that I teach, I'm very transparent. I will share my numbers. I will share the depression, the things that kept me up at night, all of my pain points, because I want it to be very, very real. Because again, owning a rental company, everything is very real. You have so many moving pieces that go into it. On top of the sheer volume, I think one summer we had in one weekend, we had 30 clients. Wow. Whereas most people, maybe 3 at the most in 1 week, but that was 30 clients in 1 week. So just by sheer volume alone, there's a lot that you learn through that process.
And the logistics of just that 1 week, I can't imagine.
Yes. Trying to figure out, okay, how do we accommodate all of the deliveries? How do we, from a staffing viewpoint, luckily most of those orders were will call, but it's still this is going to be a nightmare. The warehouse is going to be a mess. And for those that know me, know I am OCD with organization and keeping things tidy. But you kind of have to bend the rules a little bit when you own a rental company.
I bet you do. And so will call means come and pick it up?
Come and pick it up. Okay. Yes. We offered both delivery, and then, if they had proper transportation, they were able to pick up their rentals on their own.
Okay. All right. So you started conceptualizing in 2011, and is that the same year you started the full-fledged, like, this is our business, something borrowed, we're in the game?
Yes. Okay. Started that. It was October, so it was a little late. The initial business model of the business was actually that of a lending library. And not a lot of people know that because it was very short-lived. But it was, Portland is known, it's the hipster central. It's known for its tool libraries, its kitchen share libraries, its garden libraries. And I thought, why not this? Well, I didn't quite realize this because I wasn't the typical bride, that you have to make sure that you have an item on your wedding day. You need to know that it's going to be there. So, but unlike most tool libraries, you don't make reservations. Well, with rentals, you kind of have to. Mm-hmm. So I slowly morphed out of that. I did a sliding fee scale, and that still just didn't quite resonate with me when I saw clients pulling up in their Escalade with, their carat diamond rings and looking at their vendor list. I'm like, okay, I need this to feel good. This has to be a full for-profit business in order for it to be sustainable in the long haul.
That's right.
Very hard decision to make, but ultimately it was the best decision. And it just, like I said, it didn't hinder business one bit.
Right. Well, and you provided income and jobs and sustainability for 9 other employees. I mean, it doesn't have to be a not-for-profit to be something that's valuable to the community.
Exactly. And we still, I was able to find ways based on our values of giving back to the community, of sponsoring events, sponsoring nonprofit events, or whether that was through monetary donations or, in-kind donations, obviously, for furniture and decor.
Absolutely. I like that you kept that value, front and center in your business. So tell us a little bit about how you said it was an overnight success, but I know you worked really hard in this business. But tell us a little bit about how you grew Something Borrowed, because you sold it very successfully. So how did you grow it to be what it was, to be a business that was sellable?
Yes. So I kind of mentioned I had a business mentor, and I have a few, but this one in particular, it was through a 2-year master's level program on entrepreneurship. And it was quite the investment, like a hefty dollar amount that was, to be a part of it. And I always preach, you have to invest in yourself, especially as women. We tend not to. We tend to put other people ahead of us. And it single-handedly was the best investment that I ever could have made, because it helped me create that foundation to the business. So it went over, reading a profit and loss and a balance sheet and creating a budget for, for the business, which was really hard, let me tell you, especially when you're dealing with rentals. Even, understanding basic bookkeeping, which again, from a rental perspective, there's a couple of different ways that you can go about looking at your inventory. Well, is it an asset where we depreciate the value, or do we expense it? And knowing which one is right and when to apply either of those. And then it also heavily focused on sales and marketing, really honing in on your ideal client, taking a look at your website and your branding and, does everything fit together cohesively? Also looking at leadership and personnel. Really, my wake-up moment was in that particular program. I had to sit down and I kept track of my time for 2 weeks. And I was very, very diligent about it. And at the end of that period, I discovered that I was working 80 hours a week.
Oh my God.
And that was insane. I was able to, and I got a little geeky with it. I categorized it. So I kind of was able to figure out, okay, what is it that I love to do? Mm-hmm. What is it that I can either outsource, or what is it I need to hire someone for? And I took the plunge, really, really scary, and hired my first employee, Lindsay. And Lindsay, and her and I kind of laugh. Her first title was the Jill of all trades, because I just didn't know. I was like, I know I need help, but I don't have this official fancy title for you. So let's work on it together. And we did eventually, come up with it a couple of years down the road. But just that one little step made such a big difference, because I was no longer working in the business. I was able to work on the business and be able to kind of strategize, kind of seeing into the future. Where do I want this to go? How do I want the business to look? I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not hired her. And I tell everyone, if you think you can't afford someone, you really can. Even if you start off with, this is a 20-hour-a-week position, or maybe you even start with a virtual assistant. I knew I needed someone on site to handle design consultation. So a VA for me just wasn't quite feasible. Right. But I started her off as part-time. And by the time I sold the business, she was full-time, and we had other full-time employees as well.
Oh, wow. And so once you hired her, and I have a few other questions to unpack here, but once you hired Lindsay, how long until you could continue to hire other people?
Well, the next step was to hire a delivery crew, since I had been actually outsourcing our deliveries, and that was getting really, really expensive. And I wanted to make it a little bit more affordable for our clientele. Granted, especially with specialty rentals, there's a lot more that goes into it. It's not like a FedEx package that fits neatly in a box. This is like antique furniture, or nice brand new furniture that you have to protect, and they don't stack easily. Or if you have 100 wooden dining chairs that don't fold, those are all logistical nightmares. Yeah. So bringing in a good, reliable staff for deliveries was kind of the next step in the hiring process. And they weren't full-time, which you have to kind of get creative with hours, come up with incentives to keep them energized and maintaining that level of customer experience that we want. After them, I ended up hiring, and this was a kind of another pivotal point. I was doing both styling and design, plus being the owner of a business. And I had to sit down, have a reality talk with myself and say, okay, I need to do one or the other within this area. I love the styling and design work, but it wasn't my background. Business, though, that was my jam. Like, I geek out on that stuff. And I figured that was going to be much harder than finding a designer, because we probably had 1 or 2 designers a month come to us looking for work. I was able to bring on a previous client of ours to be our designer, and she just rocked it. So we then, we started just ever so slowly building up this team. The last person I hired on was our warehouse operations manager. And that allowed me to really fully take a step away from the day-to-day operations. And especially at the end, I wasn't there all the time. Shoot, I was hardly there at all. Having a commercial dishwasher also helped, because I didn't have to hand wash dishes. Yes. But it was a slow progression. Again, we bootstrapped it. I didn't have company credit. Everything was done on a cash basis. So I really had to make sure that I was planning my financials very strategically when I did go through that hiring process.
Yeah. So back to and that's a really fascinating to know, and like kudos to you for not doing anything on credit and really keeping an eye on your cash financials. You mentioned that you went through that entrepreneurship program, which really focused heavily on processes, sales and marketing, ideal client. Did you feel like you learned some of your hiring and employee skills through that program as well?
I did. Luckily for me, I used to work at Intel Corporation, and I actually had to manage a staff of 30.
Okay.
So I had some HR and leadership experience in the past, and I've gone through because my I have a very strong corporate background. So I've been through leadership training before, but it wasn't anything. In fact, I remember when I left Intel, I said I never want to manage employees again. Well, famous last words. Never say never.
That's right. That's right.
So I had that, but it's different when you're working corporate versus a boutique company. So I had to, work very closely with my mentor. I ended up working with an HR company to really fine tune all of the processes and create, okay, what's a disciplinary action, going to look like? I hate telling someone, well, you're just not doing the greatest job, or, you're missing your times, or you're late, or you're whatever it is. So that for me, honing in on that little specialty made me just more confident so that I was able to handle those difficult situations better.
I like how seriously you took the process of hiring. And I'm sure it was probably a slow burn, and these are things that you had over time. And of course, you have a lot of background experience, but I don't hear a lot of people when they're hiring for their wedding business talk about working with HR, working, with an HR company, working with a mentor to, create incentives. And I know that, that was your idea, but you know what I mean? Not that they don't take it seriously, but I think these are all really steps that were probably really beneficial when you went to sell that business too.
They were. In fact, that was one key thing that the buyer said. They're like, wow, okay, you're so organized. You have everything ready to go. And especially from a personnel standpoint, I went through a performance appraisal with my team. I had personnel files. I knew the legalities of employment, probably more so than most people, and definitely the difference between a contractor versus an employee, which is a really big one within the wedding industry. But, having everything at my fingertips, both in digital, some hard copy, but mainly digital, made that purchasing process much, much faster.
Oh, smart. So is there anything I want to dig into, you came to this realization that the why was gone for you and you decided to sell, and I want to dig into that. But is there anything else you want to share about pre-selling the business that we need to know, or that other, rental companies should know?
I will just say that be prepared for it to be emotional. I knew it would be, but I didn't know to what extent, and not just for myself, but I was also very honest with my employees. And some people said not to be, but I didn't want to feel like I was tiptoeing around them, especially since we were so close. They were like family to me. And so I had many times where I really questioned, is this the right decision? But I knew in my heart of hearts, I really, really listened to my gut that said, this is what you're meant to do. Your next chapter is waiting for you. And, this is the best decision for the health and the success of the company.
I like that. Thank you for that honesty. So you ran it for, what would that be, 6 years? 7 years?
7 years,
7
yeah.
years. Okay.
Yeah, 7 years.
All right. So 2 years ago you said you started the conversation with yourself. You decided that it was time. Walk us through preparing our business to sell.
Yes. So my first thing was, okay, I need to figure out what's my walkaway number. I need to have a number in my head, because we're all so close to our business that we sometimes think that we're going to get way more money for it than it's really valued at. And that's a reality that you have to be willing to live with. We are, and my mentor told me this, we're not a brand. Unless you're a big name like Coca-Cola or Nike, Amazon, those are brands. We might think we are within the wedding industry just because we have 10,000 followers, but that doesn't equate to business. So I was like, okay, I have this number in my head. This would be my ideal. This is what I would go down to. And then I had to kind of work backwards from there and figure out, okay, what exactly on pen and paper is the business valued at? And I happen to know how to do a basic business valuation. So I sat down and I ran the numbers very thoroughly. You come up with a low, a medium, and a high. And not just for me, but that's what a business broker is going to do. They don't care about your brand. There's no financial number that you can apply to that because, again, you might have a great website. Well, a great website that's current, that's well branded, that's an asset. But, everyone knows us, that is not. That means absolutely nothing. And we have to kind of get past that, as I mentioned. So I kind of was looking at it from the eyes of, okay, if I work with a business broker, because I was going to start that process, I ended up not needing to. What are they going to be looking at? And I knew exactly the things. So coming up with that valuation really helped me realize that, okay, my walkaway number is pretty accurate. It wasn't just a guess. Like there's financial data that backs this up. And then in this really roundabout way, I was able to find a buyer. It was kind of like a telephone game. And the buyer had experience purchasing rental companies in the past. And which was great. But I also learned that most rental companies are not based off of a valuation. They're based off of what your assets are. So it was an asset purchase. So that was a little bit of a different, and I wasn't quite prepared for that because it lowered the value because it was strictly an asset purchase versus purchasing the entire business as it was.
So what were give us an example, what were the assets in your business, like the inventory, the employees, the delivery trucks, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's all of your inventory. So making sure that you are utilizing an inventory management program so you can run your numbers. I keep stressing this, like you have to have your bookkeeping, your accounts. All those receipts sitting in a shoebox are not going to do you any good. You have to be like pristine with your numbers and accurate. They have to be reviewed by an accountant, including your asset list. So that asset list is primarily any furniture, any inventory that you have, rentable inventory. But it also does include any other assets such as a delivery vehicle. Employees don't count. They're not considered an asset. There's no monetary because a new buyer, a new company owner, they might want to get rid of them. Luckily, they did not. So it's other things like office furniture that you might have, or a dishwasher, other types of assets that you actually report to the IRS as an asset is, computer equipment, printers. Those are all considered assets.
Okay. And so purchasing your business ended up being an asset purchase and not what you had done previously. So was it like a big shock, or was it like, oh, okay, I get it. We're just going to do this a little differently and it's lower than I thought?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a shock, but I understood where they were coming from. Okay. So, and the other part of that too is that they were also purchased our customer list. So it's looking at, okay, what rentals do you have on the books already? And looking into, what deposits or retainers have you collected? And that was all included in that purchase price, in addition to the assets. It was just it was a different way of doing things because I was always told by several people, including a very close friend who is in mergers and acquisitions. He buys and sells companies for a living. No, most companies, it's a valuation. So it took me by surprise. But again, I saw the point that they were making and where they were coming from.
Mm-hmm. How did you, let's see, I have two questions. You mentioned if you have 10,000 followers, that doesn't really matter. And, brand will always pay, but you have to have a big one, right? And yes. So did the size of your email list or your website traffic or your social media presence, did that matter at all in the sale?
No, not really. At the end of the day, there's no value associated with those. In fact, we had a really good, strong social following, and they ended up merging their accounts. So because they're a rental company already, they kind of started pointing everyone to their main account. So that was kind of like, oh man, that really, like the business is really going away. Now it is going to be different if someone comes in and purchases the entire business, your brand and everything. You will likely get a little bit more of a valuation just because they're purchasing kind of this business in a box versus someone who's already established, who already has their processes in place, who already has systems that they use, who doesn't necessarily need all of that additional, those additional things.
Hmm. So would you say in this case they were more like absorbing your inventory and your
Yes.
reputation?
Yes, definitely, definitely. And
Okay.
it worked out really well because our inventory style was so perfectly aligned. It wasn't a big box rental company. I had kind of, was starting to go down that path of, well, maybe a local big box rental company would want to purchase a specialty rental company to, expand their client base. But we didn't need to do that. And I am kind of happy about that. I was able to maintain that boutique experience. So the inventory was a perfect fit for their style and their aesthetic. And, like I said, it was just this perfect storm of they wanted to expand. I got in front of them at the right place at the right time, and it moved really fast, really, really fast.
How did they find out that you wanted to sell your business?
It was through my designer. Like I said earlier, it was
Oh,
kind of like
cool.
this telephone game of, I mentioned it to my designer, she mentioned it to someone, and then they were the ones that had that connection. And it really was like, okay, as I mentioned, you sometimes want to keep things hush hush.
Right.
You don't want to lose business and people, people may be thinking you're closing doors or liquidating. But in this case, it really worked to the advantage of, no, I was able to get in front of the right people who really were actively looking at expanding into the Northwest market.
Ah, that's so neat. And you mentioned it moved really fast. And we've talked about some of the things that you had to put together. What did they want to see? Like, can you kind of list out a few things that you gave them when they were, deciding if they wanted to buy your business?
Yes, yes, for sure. So definitely they want to see the last 3 years of your profit and loss statements, as well as a current balance sheet, as well as your last 3 years of tax returns. So, as I mentioned, having your books in order and having them actually reviewed by an accountant is very important. In fact, it's crucial. That's the number one thing. And be prepared for them to go through it with a fine tooth comb. There were some purchases that I maybe not have been too proud of,
Mm-hmm.
or some, like the investment in this master levels program was through the business. And it's like, okay, well, those are little red flags, but why don't you tell me about this? So just know that they need to understand the numbers so that they can do their own projections. Also, just having all of your paperwork organized. So whether that's your client and or any vendor contracts, if you happen to have a patent or any trademarks, all of the leases, whether you're leasing, delivery vehicles or your warehouse space, obviously a vehicle title, and any other agreements that you have in place, they're going to want to see those as well. In fact, what I did to make everything much easier was I created a whole Google Docs spreadsheet of everything, any memberships that I belonged to that maybe had a recurring monthly membership fee or even a yearly membership fee. It was, okay, these are the contracts that we have, our client contracts. This is, and I had spreadsheets for those as well. It was anything and everything. It was passwords and login accounts. It was, these are people that I think you should meet. I probably did a little bit more than I needed to, but I wanted to be, overly giving just so that it made that process go a lot faster. And then, of course, having your asset list. So it's that, as I mentioned, your furniture, your inventory, company vehicles, having that all in a spreadsheet, as well as, so maybe things that are not in QuickBooks, although those should be in QuickBooks, as well as your inventory. So we used RW Elephant. It was super easy to print off an inventory list and they could see in black and white, okay, this is when you purchased it. We're going to go off of, what your assets are valued at. They also wanted to know what my payroll was. So I had to
Mm.
have payroll reports ready. And that was just a year-to-date payroll report broken down by employee, their job role, and then their wages, as well as any job descriptions for the employees, mainly to say, okay, are you paying employees what we would pay them? If we want to continue on with that employee relationship, we need to make sure that we have everything ready to go. So those are a lot of like the big key things. I'd say the financial is definitely the number one. Think about it too. A lot of, a buyer is probably going to have to take out a business loan, and a bank is not going to loan them the money unless they see those financials as well.
And so did you know, I mean, I knew you had a lot of corporate experience, and did you have to sit down with this potential buyer first to know exactly what they needed, and they said, here's everything we want from you, and then you went back and gathered all of those items? Is that how that worked for you?
So they provided me with a list,
Okay. Oh, interesting.
and most all of the communication was done via email. So we had this long paper trail of, okay, we need this, we have questions on that. As I mentioned, I created and I kept everything in Google Docs, so that way it was easily shareable, and they could, whoever else was on their team making that buying decision had access to everything as well. But it was pretty straightforward. The items that I mentioned, those were at the very top. And then from there, it was just kind of this trickling of, okay, well, we need more backup on, on this, or can you explain, these expenses on your P&L, or these, these assets. With the assets and especially inventory, I also had to make note of any inventory that was out for repair. We also had, and I didn't really even include that because it was even harder to track, but any non-inventory items. So I had a whole styling closet of just random things. Some of it discontinued inventory that I just couldn't get rid of because it was really cool.
Yeah.
So they did come out. They did a walkthrough as well because they want to know, hey, your inventory looks good online, but what does it look like in person?
Mm-hmm.
And is it really, has it been maintained? So that's another key point of getting your full value out of your assets, is making sure that you're properly maintaining your inventory, which we did. We actually made a really big investment, especially in our soft seating, to have it professionally Scotch guarded, which is, this particular brand is 10 times stronger than that. It's an investment, but we're able to get much more use out of the inventory and particular furniture.
Do you feel like well, I can't remember what I was going to ask. I'll come back to that. So once you were, I remember, did it feel a little, I mean, you mentioned there was a few, they were really going to go through everything with a fine tooth comb, and they would, ask about different expenses and things of that nature. Did that process, were you totally prepared for that? Or did it feel a little bit like you felt exposed a little sometimes, like having to explain things?
Oh yeah, there's definitely that exposure. You kind of feel vulnerable with, okay,
yeah.
I am showing everything here. It's like, kind of flipping your skirt up and they're looking underneath the hood there. And I knew that, though. I knew that was going to be part of the process. And really what they're looking for are more of those non-operational expenses, such as, continuing education, any memberships or travel. Those, for the IRS, they obviously help lower your bottom line, but technically they should be excluded from their analysis of your cash flow, because those are decisions you're making. I made the business decision to network and to be a part of membership organizations and to invest in my education. But that's my decision. That doesn't mean they're going to be doing the same exact thing. They have different ways that they want to operate, and anyone, even if it's someone off the street, they're going to look at it the same way. So yeah, I had a bit more travel. I had, this more on the educational component that was great for, keeping us not having to owe the IRS so much. But from that cash flow perspective, yeah, it did kind of hurt us a little bit as far as looking at the profitability of the business.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that. It makes sense. But also too worth it, because, who knows what kind of continuing education you did that really contributed to the success of the business. So
exactly.
Maybe it hurts a little bit on the back end there, but I think it's hard to put a number on that too.
It is. And it was just like I said, for them, that was hey, can you tell us about this? Is this something that, is ongoing, or was it a one-time thing, or what was this exactly? Because as I mentioned, especially that entrepreneur program, that was a hefty, hefty investment. And I saw a return on that investment, but they're not going to go through that themselves.
Right.
And, maybe even someone else that didn't have that specialty rental experience, they probably wouldn't either. A lot of companies that I see, not necessarily within the wedding industry, but a lot of them are investors that come in. They're just buying the business as an investment. So they're going to operate quite a bit differently than, someone maybe who's already established, or even someone that is, maybe they're retired and they just want to get back to work doing something more creative.
Mm. So what haven't we covered when the process of selling a business? What other tips do you have for us?
I will say that, it's very important. You want to make sure that you have that good impression as well. As I mentioned, maintaining your inventory, which you should be doing as a rental business. And, regardless, your clients are paying top dollar to rent a piece. You want to make sure that you're properly maintaining them. Yeah. But having, your operations look good. As I mentioned, they came and they did a full walkthrough. They inspected everything. And they had said, wow, your warehouse is so organized and everything is so orderly. You have systems in place. You have processes in place. Like, you can tell that you've been a really good business person because you have this super well-oiled machine that can operate almost flawlessly. And so that is important, kind of looking at that bigger picture, regardless if they have their own processes or not. That from their viewpoint is, you took this business seriously, and we can tell, like, this for you, it is an emotional decision. Which on that note, when you are selling your business from an emotional viewpoint, it's to the buyer's advantage because they know that they could probably ask for a little bit less. Because like me, I was already 1 foot out the door. I had checked out already. I just wanted to move on with that next chapter for myself. So that kind of then becomes more of a little bit of a negotiating point.
Oh, I would not have thought of that. That's a really good point. So you were ready and they could probably sense that.
Yes. They definitely sense that. In fact, at the very end, we were supposed to close 2 months later. And I'm like, we had something come up. I'm like, let's do it. We need to do it sooner rather than later. Like, I'm just ready. So we did. It usually, like I said, on average, it can take 6 to 8 months, even up to a year. And we did it within a couple of months.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, it was a very accelerated process of going through that selling process. And also, you need to consider the timing. So if you have a really bad year, maybe just business all around was slow, that is not the best time to sell. You want to try and sell, and that's always hard because we're like, oh, that's when we want to sell, but really you want to sell when you're in a good year, when your numbers have been maybe the highest they've ever been. Because again, they're going to look through the past 3 years, and if they notice 1 year is off, especially that current year, that can sometimes be a red flag. And we were kind of in that particular year had been a little bit slower for us. It was for a lot of people within our area. But we had such solid growth over the previous years that, hey, 1 year off, we're not going to worry too much about this, especially seeing what you have on the books already.
Yeah. Did you negotiate when you sold to them? Were you like, here's the keys, I'm done, bye-bye? Or are you like helping to consult them at all? I guess they were already rental owners, so that's probably not needed. But I know that sometimes happens, is that the person stays on and consults for, 3 months, 6 months, a year, and then they're out.
Yeah,
so
yeah. And I didn't have to do any of that. I was prepared to. But like I mentioned, they have their own processes. They had someone already in the Portland area that was going to be taking over as the on-site manager. So it was really here's the keys and that's it. Like I wouldn't have wanted it that way. I did kind of want to have a little bit more of a transition, hey, come to networking events with me. Let me introduce you to people. But I can also see it from the other standpoint of, they have their own ways of doing things and they want to establish a name for themselves. So it made it kind of easy for me because there was less work. There was less of that. And especially knowing that it was a little bit more of an emotional purchasing decision, or a selling decision on my part. It was very cut and dry. Okay, the sale date is this date, and as of that date, you're free to do what you want, kind of a thing.
How have you felt since selling your business?
Excited that I have Summers back. It's a little bittersweet. I do miss the people that I worked with because I did have such an amazing family in Portland. I now live in San Diego. So I do feel like I've left my family behind, and especially my employees. They were family to me. And now working from home, working virtually, it's really different than being around people all the time. And there's good days and bad days, but I do kind of feel sometimes that I've turned invisible, and I wasn't really prepared for that. That wasn't something that I ever anticipated. I thought, oh, I'd always be, in this wedding industry. And it is a lot different now being in the coaching and, business mentoring field, because it's B2B, it's business to business, which everything is different when you're B2B versus, working directly with brides and grooms.
That's right. What do you mean by you felt invisible? Can you unpack that a little bit for me?
Yeah, it's going through a name change. My married name was Lena Bigsby, and everyone knew me by that name. So now I'm back to my maiden name, Lena Richards. I'm no longer the face of Something Borrowed, because Something Borrowed is no longer. So it just kind of felt like I just kept getting pushed back. I wasn't not attending any local networking events. In fact, San Diego doesn't really have a whole lot in the way of networking. So it's just kind of this, I feel like I'm jumping up and down saying, I'm still here, I'm still here, I'm still the same person, I still have all this experience that I want to share, but it's a lot more difficult. Had I known that, I probably would have started the mentoring business much earlier, or at least been more proactive in getting it marketed while I still had Something Borrowed, because people made that association between, they could make that association between the two a lot easier.
Yeah. Do you feel that's really bold to move? What was your impetus for moving from Portland to San Diego?
I'm not from Portland originally. I usually don't stay in one place for very long, and I felt like I was raised in Alaska, and
cool.
I kind of felt the same way when I left. I'm like, I feel like I'm at my ceiling here, and I love to be in different places because that's how I learn and grow, and I like the challenge. So for me, I kind of felt the same way in Portland. I was like, I know everyone here. No, that's a good and a bad thing, because you feel like who more am I going to learn? You're always going to meet someone new. But I was ready to enter into a different area. My coaching is virtual, so I work with people, rental companies from across the U.S. And thought, oh, San Diego, it's a huge wedding industry. There's going to be lots of people I can meet. Well, as I realized, like I mentioned, there's the networking here is definitely lacking. And also my sister lives here. So I had had a place to stay. It was such a great opportunity. And why not move to where the sun is, where I'm so used to all the rain.
That's so true. And it's so nice to have a sister. That's a special relationship. I like that.
Yes.
Lena, this has been such a fun conversation. I really appreciate how candid you've been about this. It's been really eye-opening. I felt like I knew what it would take to sell a business, but this is a lot. Especially, I appreciate you just sharing, what goes on as a human when you're selling a business and making big changes.
Yeah. And I'd be happy to share. I wrote a pretty long article on this on my blog that goes through all of the points that I mentioned, on what you need to have. And I'd be happy to share that, just because it is a lot of information and it can be hard to kind of keep track of everything. But I have coached and mentored other businesses that have, thought about selling their business, even if it's just a clarity. Hey, is this really what you want to do? Is it the right time for you where you're at right now? Because that can be a really hard decision, especially when you don't necessarily want to talk to anyone else about it. You feel very alone.
That's right.
And so, just know that I've been through that before. And I'm always, always happy to offer any insight that I can.
That's so amazing. I will link to that blog post. I'm also going to link to, you have a really cool PDF guide about tools you can use to run your rental business, which I get this question more than I thought I would on this podcast, and I have no idea. So I'm going to link to that as well, you guys. All of this will be in the show notes. Lena, tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So on my website, it's just Lane, Lane. I know my name is pronounced Lena, but it's Lane, LaneJRichards.com. And then same with Instagram, Lane J Richards.
Okay, perfect. And you guys, I'm going to put those all in the show notes as well. What if you were going to share something with sometimes here's what I feel like in the industry. Sometimes I feel like we think that this is it. Like we have to make this business work because it's end all be all. I feel like sometimes we get that sense, right? And like we all have a bunch of anxiety and we don't know what our next step should be, or it's like, if I'm not going to be a successful wedding planner, then who am I, or this, that, and the next thing. But I feel like you've just proven that you can do something successfully for a good amount of years, and then you can move on to another successful thing. And we don't have to be so precious about this one experience in our life. What advice would you give to a person who doesn't want to share yet with their friends that maybe they're ready to move on to something outside of the industry?
It is live your life for you, not for others. And that has been something that I didn't always do. Once I started to accept, hey, you know what? I am this different person. I am not going to bend my wants and my needs to make either my family happy or my friends happy. I'm going to do what the heck I want to do and not be afraid to just really step into your skin and own it, because our life is way too short. And if you're not happy with what you're doing, and you even have a little inkling of, you know what, I really think I want to maybe leave the wedding industry and do something completely different, that's okay. Own it with everything that you have and be very proud of that. Even just for the mere fact that you can identify that and come to terms with, I just don't care anymore. I want to live the life for me, because ultimately when I'm happy, everyone else around me is going to be happy.
That's right. Amazing. What a great place to end. Lena, thank you so much. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I did as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to She Creates Business. Please take a minute and head to iTunes to leave an honest review so we can help more wedding pros find the show.